putting themselves in a position where they could potentially push for a playoff seed or a play-in seed at least.
Would you fall for me like I fall for you?
Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of NBA Now. It's your boy Dom, and we're gonna get right into things here today. So, today, we are talking about some Detroit basketball. Obviously, the Detroit Pistons made a lot of moves over the offseason, furthering their rebuild around Cade Cunningham and the boys out there in Detroit, and putting themselves in a position where they could potentially push for a playoff seed or a play-in seed at least. I think this season, the additions, the subtractions, everything all about Detroit this offseason was super interesting to look at, right? So, obviously, the major thing is bringing in Jaden and Ivey to pair with Cade Cunningham in that backcourt, creating one of, if not the best, under 25 backcourts in the league. A pairing that I think is going to work super well, and I'm really excited to see at the NBA level. Obviously, that starts with Cade Cunningham. So we saw him in his rookie season go on to make a all-rookie team, right? He did his thing, was able to, score 17 points per game. He had 5 assists, 5 rebounds per game, and was pretty solid, right? Obviously, I think his efficiency is going to continue to go up as, the years go on and stuff like that. He kind of gets more acclimated to the league. He was just a rookie. And so he only shot 40% from the field and 31% from 3. I definitely expect that field goal percentage to go up, especially having more shot creation around him and more just depth on the roster. Guys that, he's going to have less Corey Josephs and Frank Jacksons on the court and more Jaden Iveys and just other guys on the court that are a little bit more experienced, right? So obviously the loss of Jerami Grant will be a big thing, but we'll get into that here in a minute. As for Basketball Reference's projections for Cade Cunningham this next season, they project him to increase his field goal percentage by about 2% or something like that. Nothing major. They expect his 3-point percentage to go up about 10%. Or no, not 10%. They expect it to go up about 1%. So nothing crazy percentage-wise do they expect. I think it will probably go up a little bit more. I think we could see him at 44-45% from the field, depending on how many points he's averaging per game. And then, obviously, I do want to cover last year, he did also average 1 steal and almost a block per game. So 1.2 steals and 0.7 blocks per game. They project both of those to go up to be 1.4 steals and 0.8 blocks per game. They expect both his rebounds and assists to go up to over 6 per game each. And then, like I said, his points to increase to 19.5, almost 20 points per game. So I don't think those are terrible projections. Whether this is his breakout year or his third year in the league, obviously the third year in the league is more common to see a breakout player. But I think when you're looking at high-end talent like a Cade Cunningham, a guy that was obviously drafted number 1 overall and everything like that, I think he's got all the potential in the world. Honestly, loved this guy in college. He was going, that was the year that Baylor won it, and he was going head-to-head with them, during the regular season. Obviously, they didn't make it as far as you'd expected them to in the in the NCAA March Madness tournament. But just a super interesting and intriguing player. He's listed at 6'6". I feel like he's probably like 6'7" or 6'8", but he might only be 6'6". Yeah, he's just super interesting. I think, finally getting to, just be the point guard and have a secondary true scorer in the backcourt next to him is going to be super good. Now, Killian Hayes, I think he's kind of the odd man out on this team. Obviously, a guy that, hasn't shown any progression. He's been the exact same player his whole time that he's been in the league. Now, he's still very young, and the defense, there's definitely something there potentially, but offensively, he's not even just aggressive. I mean, he takes like the same amount of shots both years that he's been in the league, and so I think he'll end up kind of being the odd man out. We could see potentially somebody trade for him, or he kind of ends up writing out his contract here, and at this point it looks like he has a Dennis Smith Jr. career path. Now Dennis Smith Jr. himself is still pretty young, but it looks like he's going to be a high-picked guard that just doesn't pan out, and sometimes that happens. Obviously, Detroit getting the first overall pick and being able to get Cade Cunningham kind of threw things out of the loop, because Killian Hayes was supposed to be that guy for them, and then after that disappointing rookie season, it allowed them to get Cade Cunningham and move on to better things, right? Obviously, Cade Cunningham having a much higher potential. Now, Jaden Ivey. Jaden Ivey is definitely, like I said, a guy that I'm super, super interested in with this team. Honestly, this is a guy that, I could have seen get drafted higher. I could have seen him go to the Kings. I know a lot of people thought he was going to go there, or potentially the Kings were going to trade with, like, the Knicks or somebody to come up and get him. I could have seen him go over Jabari Smith. I know Jabari Smith was mocked number 1 a lot, even though I think it was a pretty majority consensus that Paulo was the best player in the draft, and I think Paulo has continued to show that to this point. I will have a Magic video coming out in a day or two, so make sure you guys keep a lookout for that, and we'll kind of break down some of their stuff going on. Now adding Paulo Banchero. And honestly, even if like OKC would have taken Jaden Ivey at 2, I would have been shocked, but I would have been like, that's a fantastic pairing with Shea and Giddey, because you have the size with those two defensively, right? You can kind of have Ivey guard, and Ivey's not like tiny, like he's 6'4", 6'5", you know what I mean? So he's not a tiny guard, but you could have him guard the point in that situation, and I mean, you even have Lou Dort to come off the bench. Like, that would have been interesting for me. Obviously, Chet is their biggest need at center, but Ivey is definitely, I think he's got probably the second highest. I mean, if Chet pans out, he's got all the potential in the world. I personally don't think he's going to pan out. I don't think I've necessarily given that opinion on this channel to this point, but I don't think he's going to pan out in that way. I think maybe he ends up being a 4, but I don't see him ever becoming like an MVP candidate or anything like that. It just feels like there's too much to be done there. Now, who knows? Well, he's definitely a wait-and-see thing, but behind Paulo, I think Jaden Ivey was the most secure pick, in my opinion, to just have a all-star career. You know what I mean? Like, this guy's gonna be an all-star at some point in his career. He's just too good not to be. At worst, he ends up being like a Drew Holiday or Mike Conley that only gets like one all-star nod late in their career, but everybody views as an all-star caliber guard his whole career. So I think that'll kind of happen with Jaden Ivey. I think the playmaking ability being pushed more on Cade Cunningham, who is a natural, phenomenal playmaker, is going to help Jaden Ivey more, because he's not going to feel like he's got to create all the plays. He can just create the plays for himself, go within the flow of the offense. He's going to get some points from Cade Cunningham just drawing so much of the defense's attention, and that's going to allow Jaden Ivey to, I think, really thrive. I could see him, kind of having a slow start in the first half of the rookie season, as we kind of saw with other scoring guards recently, like an Anthony Edwards, like a Jalen Green, and who I think he kind of fits that similar mold of player, or even like a Trae Young, where Trae Young, he struggled at the first half of the season, and then by the end of the season, he was making a Rookie of the Year campaign against Luka Doncic, who had been playing phenomenal all year long, right? Averaging over 20 the whole year, and Trae Young was still able to play so good in the second half of the season that he had people wanting him to be the Rookie of the Year. So I think Jaden Ivey could have a bit of a slow start, especially acclimating to just NBA defenses and NBA defenders. But I definitely think by the end of the year, this guy's going to be a 15-point per game scorer at least, and is going to be a crucial part of this team, especially going forward, but also this year. I expect him, obviously, to start next to Cade Cunningham. As for the rest of the roster, picking up Jalen Duren was phenomenal. Phenomenal work by their GM. I think their GM did crazy good throughout the offseason. You were also able to bring in guys like Nerlens Noel and Alec Burks for some veteran presence. Again, like I was saying earlier when we were talking about Cade Cunningham, you have more guys that are just gonna be better than your run-of-the-mill Rodney McGruders. You know what I mean? Like, you've got quality NBA players. Now, Nerlens Noel, we'll kind of see how he fits into this team. This team actually has a lot more bigs than you would think. Obviously, we saw Isaiah Stewart looking like he might end up being a power forward for them this year. I love the energy he brings for them. He's like a 6'8" Patrick Beverley. You could compare him to a Montrezl Harrell, but he can definitely shoot better than a Montrezl Harrell. And so I think that potentially will give him more longevity in the league. Obviously, he had one of the craziest moments last year when he pretty much tried to murder LeBron James on live one of the craziest things that happened last season. It almost feels like it was 2 or 3 years ago because just how much happened last season. Honestly, being one of the best seasons, I think, in recent memory, just how many storylines and all these things that happened. Obviously, we had the lulls where, we had all these random guys that just were getting picked up for one-day contracts because, obviously, the virus is going crazy on some of these teams. But honestly, it was one of the coolest seasons when you look at some of the stuff that was able to happen and how long the season felt. Like, it, not in a bad way, I don't think. Like, it felt like it had a part 1, part 2, part 3 saga. You know what I mean? It almost felt like 2 seasons in once because of that kind of middle thing that went on. So that was interesting. But yeah, I think the overall talent on this team is definitely higher. And like I said with the big men, you've got now Jalen Duren, who potentially, I think he at least competes for the starting spot. I would start him just out of like, hey, he might be young, he might make some mistakes, but he's definitely going to be very good for us and is going to provide a lot of stuff for us. So I would be starting him. Marvin Bagley was able to secure a long-term contract with this team, so we'll see what he kind of does. Obviously a former, number 2 overall pick. So, I mean, there's a lot potentially to work with there. I think he's done definitely better since he went to Detroit. There were some games last year where he was just kind of doing his thing for them, which is obviously interesting to see. So if you can kind of have him potentially turn into a trade asset, I would think that would be super nice for this team. Or even just kind of be a bench big that can kind of come in off the bench, give you spot minutes, and just be able to score the ball. That's not a bad thing at all to be able to have, just come in and get a couple buckets here and there. Wouldn't hurt. Again, I think that kind of makes it interesting with Nerlens Noel, just because he feels like he's the only guy that's not, young out of those 4 that I've listed so far. And obviously if Isaiah Stewart can kind of move more to the 4, it does open up more opportunity for Nerlens Noel and potentially Marvin Bagley to be your backcourt off the bench. Kind of a big backcourt, especially because Nerlens Noel, he's going to defend the paint better than Bagley, which I wonder how that affects Bagley's minutes as well. But I think Bagley offensively is just going to provide more for you. And I don't know how I feel with Marvin Bagley at the 4. Obviously, it's what you would want out of him, but I think at this point he has to play the 5, even with his defensive liabilities there. He just doesn't stretch the floor enough in the way that you would want him to. And so that's kind of an interesting thing that the coaching staff will have to worry about. I think Dwayne Casey will be perfectly fine, but having the depth is also going to be nice for them because, God forsake, any of these guys get injured, you have another guy that's going to kind of fill it out, and it'll be fine. Again, I like Isaiah Stewart as an off-the-bench center to provide that energy and that, just push or whatever. But if he is able to start at the 4, come off the bench at the 4, whatever you do with him, I definitely think he needs to be in the rotation just because of the energy he's going to bring when he comes on the court. He's going to give it his all, you know what I mean? And yeah, those guys aren't $25 million players, but hey, this guy probably turns into a $10 million career player for the Detroit Pistons, where you look at Marcus Smart, a guy that's been on the Boston Celtics for years and years now, and why has he been able to do that? Because he always plays both sides of the floor, plays super hard. Now, obviously, I compared Isaiah Stewart to just a giant Patrick Beverley earlier, and Patrick Beverley's a bouncer around the league, but Patrick Beverley got like $15 million a year by fooling the league, thinking that he was like this elite defender, when really it's just he comes out there and hustles. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of defense is just putting in the effort, and he does that, and I think Isaiah Stewart can kind of fall on that path as a bigger defender. Now, we'll see how his perimeter defense continues to develop, but yeah, I like that. I like them having him. Alec Burks, again, a guy off the bench that's going to provide some stuff. Not too much to say about Alec Burks. Everybody kind of knows what he is. Yeah, I mean, Hamidou Diallo off the bench, also a high flyer and stuff like that. Shown more stuff since he got to Detroit than he did with OKC. Maybe not a huge guy going forward, but somebody that's there. He can kind of do his thing. Sadiq Bey, definitely your starting 3. We'll see what happens with Kelly Olynyk. Obviously, another big in that plethora of bigs. He's probably going to potentially be a trade asset for you headed into midseason. Towards a playoff contending team that wants a veteran there. Like I said, I think this team can compete for a low playoff spot just due to the youth and also the veteran presence that they brought into this team, and another year under some of these guys' belts. But I expect this team to be sellers at the trade deadline. I expect this team to still be focused on getting assets, to still be focused on tooling this team perfectly around Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham, definitely the duo of the future. I love Saddiq Bey next to them. I think he provides a perfect 3/4 there. Probably a little bit better at the 3, but definitely he's a guy that can shoot, and he will shoot. Don't get that wrong. He will shoot the ball. So him kind of being there as, you know, kind of a third guy that you can give it to, you know, maybe you develop him into more of a shot creator, but even if you don't, it's not bad to have him there. I think he is perfect for the modern NBA. He can rebound, he can shoot, and you just got to keep developing that defense on him, and that will be good. Other than that, though, I mean, that's the majority of this roster. You've got guys like Kemba Walker, who should be bought out. Kevin Knox, I don't expect to. I think we've seen everything that we're gonna see out of Kevin Knox. I listed Rodney McGruder earlier, more of just he'll play garbage time, I'm sure. He's a veteran. He'll get some minutes during the season, you know what I mean? Carson Edwards is a guy I was super excited coming out of high school, especially watching what he did, or not high school, college, watching what he did in March Madness, but he hasn't really done much in the league so far to this point, and I don't really see a lot of spots on him a lot of spots in this team for him, especially having Saben Lee and Frank Jackson, who can kind of take that backup point guard role, as you continue to push Killian Hayes more and more out of the rotation, just due to his lack of offensive ability and aggression in the league. And so, you know, Saben Lee and Frank Jackson, they provide decent enough, maybe not playmaking, not too much playmaking off the bench, but they provide decent enough just guard play off the bench, that it's not terrible. And most of the time, you're going to have Cade or Ivey out there, no matter what. If you're a good coach in the NBA, you stagger your players. You don't just run starters bench, like 2K may have you think. And yeah, so I think this team definitely has a lot of options. To the Jerami Grant thing, obviously the cloud that's been hanging over this video that I haven't talked about yet, him being traded and you getting Jalen Duren makes sense. Obviously, there's probably, it's kind of shocking to me that was the value of him was really just a first round pick, but you know, with him being the defender and the offensive player he is on the contract that he is now, obviously his contract will be expiring here pretty soon, but he is still on a, you know, team-friendly deal for what he provides, and so it's kind of shocking you didn't get more, but I am glad that Detroit didn't, you know, pester the market to get every little ounce that they could out of him, and they took what they needed to get what they wanted, right? They took the first round pick to get Jalen Duren, and that's exactly what they wanted to do. And sometimes you don't have to get 100% trade value if you're able to get 80%, and you're able to do what you needed to do with that asset to acquire stuff that's still going to continue to help you now and into the future when you're in this rebuilding phase. That is good enough. There is such a thing as good enough that'll get you to be great, right? And I think that was one of the moves that I really liked out of this team, was just being able to understand that Jerami Grant, he's going to take shots away from the young guys. He is definitely a very good player on both sides of the ball, but he's not going to be the end-all, save-all for this team, and he wants to, like, he went to Detroit because he wanted his own team. He got his own team. You saw what happened with that. Now he can go back to complementing better players, which is, I think, where he's best at in this league. Obviously, this is a league of understanding your role, and he plays his role perfectly. So he was able to complement Cade, help him out in his first year, and definitely show some of the young guys some things, be able to kind of spread his wings, and now he can kind of use some of what he learned by spreading his wings, go back more into a traditional role that he's had in the past, especially with the Nuggets and with OKC prior to the Nuggets, and kind of complement a superstar in Damian Lillard, right? So definitely a super smart trade, I think, for both teams. Again, I am shocked they didn't get a little bit more out of him, but there was no need to push, right? There was no need to push further than you did to potentially let the trade fall through, and then you be stuck with a aging veteran who's good on both sides of the ball. Not like he's crazy old. I think he's like 28. But like he's in his prime. You know what I mean? There's nothing wrong with having him on your team. It's not like he's 35 or something like that. But being stuck with a veteran when you are a very youthful team, having 2 top 5 picks on your team that you're trying to build around within the last 2 years, it just didn't make a ton of sense to keep him on the roster. So I think moving on from him was super smart. Yeah, that is pretty much it for Detroit. Again, I said earlier in the video, and I'll say it again, I think this is definitely a super strong roster that can push for a playoff spot, can build up some guys' trade value. I love the way Detroit has built this compared to a way that like OKC has built this, and I think you're going to kind of see me bring up OKC in the next few videos as a staple of kind of a weird way to rebuild. Now everybody's looked at OKC's rebuilding strategy around Sam Presti and everything like that, with just getting billions of picks as an interesting experiment, right? But I think when you look at Detroit, like Detroit has flipped their assets and continued to be smart, you know what I mean, with their rebuild, and not, you know, been stuck in the, oh, we need to, you know, the Orlando Magic with Nikola Vucevic and Aaron Gordon. Oh, we need to make the playoffs. We need to make the playoffs. And then completely resetting. They've been smart and, you know, slightly used their assets to continue to slowly move them in the direction that they want, while not jeopardizing their future or their present in significant ways, whereas OKC completely has gone the other way around. And I think you're going to see some of their players once OKC, because eventually OKC's stacking talent. Josh Giddey, Shea, Lou Dort, Chet Holmgren are your top guys that you're going to think of, but you have Darius Bazley, you have Poku, you have countless number, Trey Mann, oh, they have another point guard on the roster. Like, I can't even think of all the young guys that need playing time on that team, because not all of them are going to get it. And I think Detroit, you've picked the guys that you want, and you're going to continue to build around them. So you have a big core. I mean, you've got Durant, you've got Sadiq Bey, you've got Isaiah Stewart, you've got Hamidou Diallo, and that's not even mentioning Cade and Ivey, obviously. So there's definitely guys on this roster that are younger, but you have enough playing time for most of them. Now, that big issue is kind of something I brought up earlier, but that's because you went out and you got Marvin Bagley, and you were able to make a smart trade to bring in a couple veterans in Nerlens Noel and Alec Burks that, you know, you had already signed Kelly Olynyk at that point, but by making those smart moves, you've just brought in more assets, I think, and not in a deteriorating way to your other assets, being your young players in Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren, because these are guys that can teach them some stuff, and you can flip later for stuff that can kind of help you. You know, maybe you get to a point where you're making the playoffs as a 6 seed, but you flipped Nerlens Noel and Marvin Bagley for a combination of, say, like a first-round pick and like a young guy or something like that. You know, in total, that's what you got out of them, right? You're able to then take some of those future assets at that point and flip them to, along with, you know, maybe Isaiah Stewart, right? Maybe Isaiah Stewart's the odd man out of what you have, and you flip them to go get that veteran. As we saw the New Orleans Pelicans do when they went out and got CJ McCollum, to bring in a veteran guy that still wants to win, that they can connect with their young core, that we saw really elevate the Pelicans roster last year to a point where they made the playoffs as the 8th seed and gave the Phoenix Suns, who had been to the finals the year before, a run for their money without their best player on the court. So when you can do something like that, the way Detroit has built and the way the Pelicans have built, I love. Obviously, injuries have been a thing for the Pelicans, which has led to a lot of that. But I think it's a much smarter way of doing it. It gives your guys the experience, and you're not taking away from their competitive edge, because at some point, Shea is going to force OKC to just win or get him out of there, right? And so I love the way that Detroit is built, and I love the way the Pelicans built. With that said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure you guys drop a like and comment down below what you guys think Detroit can do. Obviously, I'm not predicting them to be a playoff team, but I'm saying that they have the ability on the roster to do so. So we'll see what happens. I'm super excited for year 2 of Cade Cunningham, and super excited for, well, our first time seeing Jaden and Ivey in the pros. So yeah, appreciate you guys watching, and I'll catch y'all next time. Peace out, guys.